Hey, Mickey, you seem to be eating something or to have a growth on your cheek. Which is it?
Hey, Bob.
I guess it's the eating.
I'm not eating. I'm following the latest scientific advice that guys who mumble are more attractive, you know?
Is that right?
So, that's what they said. It's the most implausible scientific finding ever.
That's great news. No, I can see that because then then women can't understand what you're saying, and most things that guys say are stupid things. So
I think it's supposed to be a sign of masculinity, Bob.
You look. You know who you look like is you look
Marlon
like Marlon
Brando
in The Godfather. You beat me to that, but you really do. It's striking.
Well, he stuffed cotton wads in his cheeks, Bob.
It's striking. I know he did.
So I'm using the Brando technique.
It's working on me. I am charmed. Frankly, Mickey, I'm having an erotic experience right now.
Not supposed to work like that, Bob. It's supposed to work on women.
I'm not the target audience?
Chicks. No, you're not my target audience, much as I love you.
Well, anyway, it's...
Anyway.
You know, I for what it's worth, this focus group is wowed.
I thought you could be Congressman Wright, Senator Wright, President Wright. And instead you're on this lousy podcast. You could have been a contender.
That's a different movie. He didn't have stuff in his cheeks for that movie.
Instead of a podcaster, which is what you is. Anyway, I'm going to eat what I'd stuffed in my cheeks.
Yeah, don't let the podcast stop you from eating, and just grossing us all out. Because really, that's what people come to podcasts for, is to get super grossed out. So just...
I think I'm going to eat. I'm going to go tubing for a second and eat.
Mickey.
Hang on.
That's not what I think of when somebody says I'm going tubing for a second. What is that sound? Could be Mickey.
Okay, I'm off tubing.
Okay, that was fast. If he had been that fast, he'd still be employed by the New Yorker.
It was very fast. He's now inveighing against the Texas abortion law, which we should discuss at some point.
So is he fully on CNN now? He is the legal guy?
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good comeback. No pun intended.
Good half a comeback. He's getting a lot of shit, though.
Yeah, we're doing our best.
No, it's not just us. It's the main antagonist seems to be Mark Hemingway, who always mentions that he impregnated a colleague and tried to get her to have an abortion whenever he comments on an abortion case, which seems to be true.
Does he throw in and she was half your age and the daughter of a colleague who considered you a trusted
those
friend?
Those are dropped off in the later tweets.
Oh.
But he did get in that he initially denied paternity and they had to do a test.
Wait, who is Mark Hemingway? Is he related to the conservative Hemingway
yes.
woman? What's her name?
I think they're married. Molly Hemingway and Mark Hemingway.
Well, okay, then he doesn't have any traction in Tubin world. He's a conservative.
Correct.
Tubin can survive attacks from conservatives.
You're probably right.
Okay.
But anyway, we should talk about Afghanistan first, I think.
Afghanistan, even before Texas abortion law and stuff. Fine. What do you want to say?
I mean, basically, the Supreme Court has saved Joe Biden because everybody, he wanted to change the topic from Afghanistan, and boom, there's a new topic. People were going to forget all too quickly anyway, but he's able to go gung-ho against this Texas law. I actually have more to say about Afghanistan than I do about Texans. So.
Well, I have mainly questions about the Texas thing.
I read your piece on Afghanistan. I have a mild critique.
I got to say, that piece did well.
It did do very well. I saw a lot of praise. But was it deserved? That's the question we ask here.
You sound skeptical.
Well, I'll get to my skepticism. First,
should we tell people what the piece said?
Go ahead.
Well, it said, okay, we're going to see all these lessons learned from Afghanistan pieces, and the main lesson I think we should learn is that we never learn our lessons because basically we made the same kinds of mistakes we made in Vietnam and Afghanistan. underestimating the extent to which our troops would be an antagonistic force and help unify the resistance to us that would have a somewhat nationalist cast. In Vietnam, we famously kind of misread a somewhat nationalist movement as a kind of almost entirely communist movement, and didn't appreciate the extent to which it was anti-colonial and considered us part of, yet another colonial power. Then some other things. I got into two other things that we should have learned from Vietnam and apparently didn't. But anyway, maybe you can...
The second one was that bad news never travels up the hierarchy, and the third was, I forget.
Well, the second, was that the military in particular... this was a point Halberstam had made in The Best and the Brightest about Vietnam, was that the military, once the intervention has started, they're very good at warning you about the pitfalls of intervention, but then once the intervention starts, they tend to give you more favorable reports that are in order, and clearly this happened in Afghanistan. Yeah. And I had a good example of that drawn from this Pushback podcast where I'd heard this former Marine.
Was that what percent of the army was Pashtun? No, that was the third example.
That was also an example that appeared later in the piece, but of the same thing where everyone apparently, according to this other guy who was also a veteran and a State Department, former State Department official, that everyone in Washington would always say, 40% of the Afghan army is Pashtun, which would have been a good thing if true, because 40 to 50% of the country is Pashtun. But according to this guy, it was never more than 3%. That number was just flat out misinformation. And then there was also an example of piece of like how that got us into trouble. The fact that the Afghan soldiers sent to police Pashtun areas were seen as outsiders just like us. A lot of them didn't even speak the language.
Right. So that was your third point, that there are complexities that we ignored.
Right, as in Vietnam.
That was a very good example of that.
Yeah. And yet, Mickey still has a devastating criticism.
Correct. Because you draw from these things that we should basically not get involved in wars. And what about Bosnia? Sometimes wars actually achieve results.
Some of these things apply more to ground occupations, which wasn't the case in Bosnia, of course.
But it just seems too simple an anti-war conclusion from that we fucked up
No,
these wars
I think it's a very good
reasons.
argument against invade and occupy, which is what we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think all of these, I think it's killer. It's the argument was, so A, the presence of our troops is going to tend to galvanize resistance. B, inevitably there will be these complexities we don't understand. We didn't understand the Buddhist Christian thing going into Vietnam. And then C, the information we get from the war zone will naturally tend to get, it will get systematically corrupted in a way that obscures the problems from our view. You put those three things together, it's like, especially those last two, it's like there's going to be these complexities. You're going to have to figure these things out. And I gave you an example of where one of the surprising complexities, the intra-ethnic, the intra-Afghanistan ethnic diversity and the tensions among ethnicities, like, you encounter that, you need to do something about it. And I showed that the disinformation was systematically obscuring that very problem. And this guy, this Marine who encountered the problem was like, he had to explain it to a general. The general was oblivious. His colonel didn't get it. It was like nobody wanted to hear about problems.
Right. So your conclusion is that Bosnia was no ground wars, but Bosnia is an exception because it wasn't a ground war, it was an air war.
Well, Bosnia has another thing that distinguishes it from some interventions like Iraq, is that it had Security Council backing. It was legal under international law.
Security Council backing is no guarantee of success. Look at Somalia.
No, it's not a guarantee of success. There are other reasons that, although I will say, sometimes when you can't get Security Council backing, it's a sign that other people think you're not going to have success, and there may be hidden complexities and problems.
That happened with Iraq. Yeah.
But anyway, I have separate reasons to favor interventions that have the force of international law over those that don't. It's not a guarantee of success. That's not the reason. But I'm very wary of intervening without the support of international law.
Okay. Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the disreputable position. I wanted to defend the totally disreputable position that we were right to pull out, but we criticized the way Biden did it. As my friend Ann Coulter says, it's like saying he was right to break up with her, but I don't like the way he did it. And it's what you always say about people who fire people. He was right to fire him, but the way he did it was too cruel or
it's
too
like
messy.
When Walter Lippmann left his wife, and he had her father tell her. Apparently, he remained on good terms with her father, remarkably. But anyway, I thought that was kind of lacking in class, personally.
I know a worse example, but I can't mention it.
Of course you can't. Oh, Parrot Room? Do we have Parrot Room?
I don't think I can even mention it in the Parrot Room. But
we'll talk about that.
It's they're actual, friends of mine. I can Anyway, somebody had his girlfriend discover it on a visit to Auschwitz.
Wait, he arranged for her to discover it there?
While she was in Auschwitz, he cleared out, and then she discovered it. I don't know.
Was the idea that then she would think, well, I guess it's not the worst thing that's ever happened in the world?
I guess there was a logic to it. Okay. I claim that there are 8 mistakes that Biden made he didn't have to make, even though he wanted to withdraw. It was right to withdraw.
We're about to go through an 8-point listicle?
8. They're quick.
Okay, so what's the rubric? These are reasons. What are these?
These are Biden's speech says, well, it's inevitably messy, and of course it's all Trump's fault. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it wasn't inevitably messy. Biden did make mistakes that are rightly criticized, and even though this is a disreputable position, I think there's something to it. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Mm-hmm. First, there's the obvious overall mistake was not being wrong about how fast the government would collapse, but abandoning Bagram. The big thing was rejecting the Taliban's offer to let the U.S. take over Kabul at the end, so we could at least evacuate everybody in Kabul before we got out. Mm-hmm. We obviously should have started the evacuation sooner. We failed to close the gate that the terrorists who killed 13 Americans and a lot of Afghans went through.
That's a lot easier to say after the bombing than before, but okay.
Right, but it was a decision, apparently. We cut off the... This is a criticism made in the dispatch, and I think I don't know if it's true or not, but the right is saying we abruptly cut off the air support and the logistics support of the Afghan army. You should, at least if you're going to do that, you should realize it might collapse pretty quickly. We didn't postpone it until winter when it would have been easier. And
I was, by the way, where did you first hear that? I think I was one of the very first people to raise that on this podcast.
I definitely first heard it from you. Yeah.
About a month ago.
But so Biden in his speech said, we were stuck with this Trump May 1st deadline. Well, no, you moved the May 1st on to September. Why couldn't you move it to November? Then it would have been a lot better. Mm-hmm. As long as you're moving it around, why not move it around in a better way? And the eighth one is that it's sort of a Trump mistake when we cut the original deal with the Taliban, we didn't include the Ghani government, and I guess the argument is that if we had he would have had a stake in it too, or something. There was an argument that we should have included him.
Yeah.
I know, because it was perceived by the Afghan army as a horrible slight, not including Ghani and a withdrawal of support. And Biden continued that by continuing Khalilzad as the negotiator. That's the argument.
Well, I think the Taliban were saying they would refuse to negotiate with the government, but Trump just kind of caved on their demands. I mean, most famously, they said, we demand that you let 5,000 Taliban prisoners out. And he did. He pressured the Afghan government, got 5,000 Taliban fighters released, and that aided and abetted the speed of the collapse. They're fighters.
It's hard to believe it's that big a deal, but okay.
5,000? That ain't nothing.
Some of them were leaders, too. But
yeah. Trump's a horrible negotiator, but I digress.
He is a terrible negotiator, but in the main thing was that people perceived we were withdrawing support, and they all cut deals with the Taliban, and that's why it was so rapid. It wasn't rapid because of a rapid military advance, as you pointed out. It was just a few phone calls, and they said, "Okay, come on in,"
Well, they had been working on that for months and months. I mean, I think they started working on that when Trump did the deal. I mean, it was they'd been making phone calls for a long time.
I think they've been working on that as soon as there was a date. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a point Sarah Chase makes. So of these, by far the most important, I think, is not taking the deal, rejecting the deal that said from the Taliban, which seems to have been sincere, which is somebody's got a police cabal. If you won't do it, we will. Why don't you do it? It would have required reinserting troops, probably more than the 6,000 it took to take the airport. But it would have helped Biden politically. It would have been a parting show of strength, and he would have still gotten out, and we would have gotten more people out. So it clearly would have been better for him.
Well, I mean, we have no idea how messy it would have been. I mean, maybe a lot more soldiers would have gotten killed. Maybe ISIS would have, they're talking about policing all of Kabul.
Yes, and you're right that one of the reasons we took helicopters from the embassy to the airport was we never managed to secure the road from the airport to the embassy.
Right. In other words, just to make sure people understand, it had been the case for a long time that Kabul was so insecure that we didn't drive people from the embassy to the airport. For years, I think, has been the case. They flew in helicopters.
Right.
That's how bad things were in Afghanistan for a long time.
If we put a lot of troops on that road, you presumably could secure it for a week or however long it took, however long we needed. Yeah,
or until some of these troops get killed in a suicide bombing. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is. I don't think it's a crazy call for Biden to say no thanks on that. Now, if it had meant that he got more time and got more people out, that's a political plus, I guess. But I think probably what American voters care most about is the Americans getting out, and just about all of them got out. And I think he's going to be able to get out any others that want to come out.
I think, certainly we didn't get out most of the special visa interpreters. They're still there.
There's still a lot of those.
And they could be, it seems to me they're in danger.
I mean, we'll see. I don't know what kind of deal they have worked out with the Taliban or hope to work out, but no, look, it hasn't gone swimmingly. I'm not defending the withdrawal. I mean, I would say, as we've said, as for your complaint that he didn't start the evacuation sooner, I don't know what you mean by sooner, but the Afghan government had not wanted him to start withdrawing people because it would seem like a sign to the Taliban that it's open season.
But can we visit their homes and whisper, "We're really getting out. You should really leave"?
I don't know how much you could
broadcasting it to everybody.
I don't think you can do a lot covertly, but I mean, also the fear, in addition to any signals at the Taliban, was that it would just undermine confidence. But of course, the guy who insisted on that policy, of course, was on the first plane out himself. But
who was that?
The leader of Afghanistan, former leader of Afghanistan.
He got out before the first plane
out.
Right.
Right.
There was an earlier deal that Blinken tried to cut where the Taliban would stop outside of Kabul and there'd be a pause and they would negotiate some new government with the Taliban inclusion. And he was pressured into accepting it, but then he fled, and somehow that meant the deal collapsed. I don't know why why does his fleeing mean that the deal with the Taliban collapses? It seems to me that's the part a logic that I don't quite understand. But even Ross Douthat, who wrote a pretty good column, especially on the issue of what was wrong with leaving 3,500 men and this so-called limited footprint that would last forever. He's very good on that. But
I didn't read that. I didn't read that part of his column. If this is the one I read part of, but I gather the idea is 3,500 wasn't going to do it. The only reason that had been doing it is because of the agreement with the Taliban that Trump forged that they wouldn't kill our guys. Because Trump had drawn down. Yeah.
Even with the 3,500, they were still advancing. At some point, we would have had to send more troops in.
Well, not only that, Trump had been withdrawing troops amid the Taliban guarantee that they wouldn't attack American troops. I think I think there had been 16,000 troops in, and that's what had been, to the extent that there was, you could hold the status quo where it was, and you couldn't quite even with that, but that's how many it was taking back when the Taliban was actually fighting us. And if we didn't withdraw, they would have gone back to fighting us, and 3,500 troops wouldn't have been anywhere near adequate.
That's a good point. I bet you just made it a little clearer than he did. I bet the reason we didn't take the Taliban up on their offer to control Kabul is that Biden was deeply suspicious of any attempt of the military to get us to reinsert troops, and he just wanted to rip the Band-Aid off and tell them to go fuck themselves, and this produced a cruder, rougher departure than was optimal.
Well, you got to give him credit. In a way, he learned the lesson of the Trump administration, which is that if you're not careful, even if you want to withdraw from somewhere, if you're not careful, the establishment will keep sucking you back in. And Trump never succeeded in withdrawing from anywhere.
And the Obama administration, it seems to me that they both failed at this for the same reason. It seems to me Obama is more to blame because he set the pattern.
Well, I think Obama's to blame in part because I think the surge ultimately grew out of a sheerly political calculation. I mean, not that he'd be the first president, but if you remember, during the campaign, now this was 2008, so this was McCain, right? And he felt like, as Democrats tend to, that he had to prove his manhood when you're going up against a Republican, especially John McCain. So he said...
It was Romney, Bob. It was Romney.
Was it Romney?
Well, 2008, he wasn't even president yet.
Right. So it's 2000... So he's running against Romney in 2008. Is that right?
Yeah. He's running against Romney in 2012.
Yeah, I'm talking about 2008.
2008?
He was running against McCain.
Right, but he wasn't president. Did he promise a surge in?
Yeah, he promised. That's what I'm saying.
He
promised a surge during the campaign, and then he got into office, and I thought surely he was lying. Right? He's not going to do this, and then he actually did it. But it all begins with a campaign political calculation.
Interestingly, Biden. Some people quote Biden as when they ask why are you pulling out of Afghanistan, he cites politics. That it's a political disaster to be bogged down and et cetera, and there'll be a big political benefit to pulling out. Now, he just could be saying that. Who knows what he's really motivated
by.
Wait,
who said that?
I've read so many accounts. One of the accounts is somebody confronting him about Afghanistan years ago, not recently, years ago, and he says, look, man, the politics of this are a disaster, So, So
far, it's not working that way for him, I would say. Withdrawal has not boosted his approval ratings.
Correct. It set in motion a vortex of failure, Bob, according to Jonathan Chait, that might engulf, the infrastructure bill. Now, I've been told not to mention the word infrastructure, that's like kryptonite to listeners. They don't. Wait,
do you mean the hard infrastructure? Well, let's defy these listeners. Do you mean the hard infrastructure bill or the soft infrastructure?
Well, both are in jeopardy now, but they mean the soft. You're delighted.
Why are these people averse to the term infrastructure? Because they say it's bullshit, especially for the soft part?
Well, it's such bullshit that it stopped being used. In Congress, they seem to, when they say infrastructure, they just mean the hard bipartisan bill. And when they mean the soft new Biden New Deal liberal wish list, they call it reconciliation. So the Democrats have basically abandoned using infrastructure for the soft bill. So it's all about daycare and parental leave and early childhood education and cash benefits to parents and green stuff and equity stuff. It's not really infrastructure.
So anyway, you must be deliriously happy that Joe Manchin has put a fly in this $3.5 billion ointment of soft infrastructure.
He put a fly, but you can't really trust Manchin. I mean, he went a little further than he had previously, saying, I'm not going to vote for anywhere near that sum. But then he had a catch, unless I'm convinced that we've thoroughly examined the effects on inflation. So he even left himself an out for the full $3.5 trillion. 2.3 trillion?
Yeah, but isn't that a euphemism for unless I get a couple of things I want?
Well, right. He always comes around and he can be bought. So yes, I'm not delirious. I'm not nearly as delirious as the Jonathan Chait was, sour and doomsaying, because I think Manchin is a weak reed on which to base anything. And I do think, and the problem is that the damn moderates in the House, instead of making a substantive objection, they just extracted a promise that Pelosi negotiate a deadline. They wanted a deadline, which has only sped the process up. So Pelosi loves this deadline, and extracted a promise that they negotiate with Manchin, which means Manchin is their point man. It's all on Manchin, right?
Right.
Instead of actually bringing up some substantive concerns of their own. So even if Manchin approves, they could abandon it. So I think probably this person is really very happy, Bob.
I'm trying to see who that is. It's a real life action. Oh, is that Nancy Pelosi?
It's a real life Nancy Pelosi doll.
Can I ask you? Maybe this is too much of a Parrot Room question, but
why do I like to play with dolls?
Do you ever have intimate moments with that doll?
I just got it, Bob. I haven't even unwrapped it. I thought you were going to demand an unwrapping.
Is that part of the attraction, the frisson, the inaccessibility of Nancy?
No, I think it's camp. It's camp. It's actually a pretty good doll. It looks like Pelosi.
I wouldn't know. I have had no interaction with that doll.
It's wearing a Pelosi-esque dress. It has a little mask. Has a little gavel, Bob.
Okay, Mickey. Let's keep our mind on our work here, okay?
It doesn't talk. Anyway, the other bad thing, as long as I'm being pessimistic from my point of view, is that they reached this deadline, okay, and everybody seems to think there is actually going to be a vote on the 27th on the infrastructure bipartisan bill. A friend of mine had a much better way of saying it than the soft versus the hard and the big versus the little. The infrastructure bill are the popular infrastructure. They're the good stuff. And the big bill is the Democratic crap, the bad stuff. So Democrats
but there are people who consider that good stuff, you realize.
There's some good stuff in it. There's
people with children, for example.
Shoring up Obamacare. There's maybe some Medicare extensions.
Hey. Dental coverage, baby. Does Joe Manchin want to be known as the guy who denied senior citizens in West Virginia dental coverage?
It's going to take 5 years to implement the dental coverage.
Why? Are they going to at least phase it in? So, 3 of my teeth,
Because the government is wildly inefficient. Anyway, there's some good things in there, but there's also a huge bunch of just amorphous, bloat-ready crap. Anyway, so the Democrats want to get the unpopular crap bill hinged with the good bill so that you have to pass both of them. The House moderates are going to vote for the good small bill, and then the House progressives say they're going to vote against it. And the question is, do enough Republicans then pile on to help the moderates to pass the good small bill? And Jake Sherman said he didn't think he thought that number of Republicans was diminishing as opposed to increasing. So that really could lead to the situation where they both get voted down.
Just to be clear, progressives are going to vote against what you're calling the hard infrastructure only if it is not guaranteed that they'll also get the soft infrastructure, or they're going to vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That you said it correctly.
Okay.
And I don't know if that means that they have already voted on it in the House and Senate, but there has to be enough of a binding commitment to vote for it that the House progressives are satisfied. And the theory is, well, screw you, House progressive. You have 40 votes, but Republicans could contribute 80 votes, and you're outvoted. But it's not clear to me that's going to happen. So the whole thing could collapse. It's very unlikely. Manchin is unlikely to want to be responsible for that. It's very highly likely that it gets whittled down some way. And how is it whittled down is the key question. So,
okay. Well, anyway, you are, I'm sure, happy that we may see no child care tax credit and no whatever the immigration thing it is that you fear, amnesty or something.
Well, it's interesting. I think the immigration thing is subject to the rule of the parliamentarian, and most people think she is going to say no, it can't stay in. But she might not, and she might sort of cut the baby in half and say some parts can stay in and some parts can't. And I actually think that Pelosi and Schumer would kind of like the parliamentarian to kick it out of the bill because it could drag down the whole bill. Mm-hmm. There may be some Democrats, enough Democrats, remember she only has like 5 or 6 votes to lose, who are skittish about it, who won't vote for it if the big amnesty is in there. So I'm not. It's not at all clear to me that it won't get kicked out. So the one that definitely will stay in is the child tax credit, and I wish I could tell you that there was a lot of pressure at the moment to get rid of it. I doubt that. I don't see it yet, but it's very, very expensive. The more the price tag comes down, the more they will be tempted to cut it. Instead of like a 3-year extension, they'll be, they're debating now between, does it expire in 24 or 25? Well, maybe they'll want to cut it back to 23. That's sort of what we're talking about. Not good enough.
Okay. Well, should we talk about the, yeah, go ahead.
Aren't you happy I brought that up?
I am. No, I want to keep abreast of this. I definitely am focused laser-like on this dental coverage thing. I mean, this is big.
On the what?
On the dental coverage thing. That alone is worth $3.5 billion in American taxation. Oh, it's trillion? Yeah, right. Well, actually, trillion, but it's close. It's worth $8 trillion. So
okay.
The Texas abortion law. This is super weird. So just to review for Texas, until the Supreme Court actually overturns Roe versus Wade, which it may well, denying women access to abortions early, until like 22 weeks or so, is unconstitutional, according to the Supreme Court. So Texas gets around this by banning them beyond very early, like 12 weeks or 10 weeks, and somebody told me that that's actually after conception, or no, that's after the woman's last period.
It's not after conception; it's after the woman's last period.
Right. Yes. So it's even. You could well imagine, I suppose, women who don't even know they're pregnant and then it's too late. But
isn't that extensive later? Isn't the conception happens? This is what I know about women's physiology, but doesn't the period stop after conception? So
right. So they would miss presumably they would miss their period, and that should be enough of a
puts
clue.
It further down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Texas wants to make it illegal. Abortions illegal that, according to current jurisprudence, are constitutionally protected. And the way they do it is they say, well, we're not going to have any Texas state officials enforce this law. Rather, we're going to deputize all Texas citizens, turn them into potential vigilantes, and tell them that if any Texas citizen sues someone who has aided and abetted an abortion provider, and various other kinds of people, and they win, in other words, a court determines that there was a violation of this new law, then I guess they get $10,000, right? So it's like bounty hunting. It's bizarre.
Do they get the $10,000?
I believe they do. I believe they're incentivized. I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
I don't know who else will get it. Also, they get attorney's fees, but the defendants can never get attorney's fees.
Right. I think they get attorney's fees plus $10,000.
Right. And you wonder why can't they just enforce every law like this, right? I mean, why not enforce crimes like this, right? You'd probably be more effective than our police and DAs in California. So maybe Governor Newsom should import some of this, but
or to take an example that actually is a question of constitutionality. I heard this from some New York Times reporter. Suppose that in a blue state, I mean, they wouldn't do this, but they wanted to outlaw possession of guns, which is constitutionally protected, right? And they just said, well, we're not, we're going to do it the Texas way. It's vigilante lawsuits,
right? I don't understand why they thought this got out from under Roe. I mean, if you did that to free speech, you could say, we can't ban speech, but you can sue anybody who expresses an anti-war sentiment.
Right. We'll give you $10,000 if you sue people who speak. Sorry, that
violates the First Amendment.
Right. No, I mean, and yet the Supreme, I don't know what the exact import of the Supreme Court's ruling is, but it sounds like they didn't just say, this is obvious bullshit, which they could have.
Well, it's a preliminary ruling. It's not the full hearing on whether this law is constitutional. They just let it stand pending the inevitable court case. But they obviously wouldn't do that if they didn't intend to undermine Roe, I think. So I think that's happening. And since I think Roe was wrongly decided, doesn't bother me that much. And I hew to the old New Republic position, which some people dispute, which is it will be a political boon for the Democrats because it'll throw it back to the various legislatures, including Congress. There's no way you're going to keep it a state issue. And once voters' minds are focused on it, pro-choice beats pro-life. Maybe not by much, but they beat it by a little.
Not in all states,
especially with the so-called suburban swing moms.
But not in all states, right?
Probably not in all states, so there'll be a smorgasbord, checkerboard, and so what?
Well, that matters to women who live in the middle of Alabama or something.
Well, not if Congress. I mean, that's why they're not going to be able to keep it at the state level. Congress is going to pass some kind of law that has nationwide effect.
Oh, that's
so maybe there's a Commerce Clause challenge to that. I'd sort of doubt it. It will be nationally decided, and I think the Democrats will win, and we'll have what we should have, which is a statutory right to abortion, not a constitutional right to abortion.
I don't understand that logic. I mean, as of the next midterm election, Democrats will not have control of both houses, almost certainly. So how exactly does this work? This
will help them get control of both houses of Congress sometime in the future. And will help get them control of state legislatures.
So you think there are enough the red but purplish states where this would work against the Republicans at the polls? An overturning of Roe at the Supreme Court would help the Democrats' congressional prospects tangibly in a number of red but purplish states.
I think so. You see it disputed by people who are not idiots, so I could be wrong. But as long as it wasn't salient, the pro-abortion people didn't have to mobilize. Now they have to mobilize, and they will mobilize, and that will be a huge help to the Democrats. Yes, I think that's right.
I mean,
they might not win the Congress, but it would certainly help them in the midterms. They have a whole lot going against them in the midterms already. This is one thing going in their favor.
Funny thing is, you might think Texas was one of these red but purplish states, is supposedly trending toward blue. On the other hand, a number of Democratic voters are presumably Latino Catholics who may be Democrats who, are not pro-choice.
I don't think Texas is that purple yet. It's definitely going in that direction, but
they keep saying it, but it never happens.
Anyway, Frances Martel, who's writes for Breitbart, is enough far to the right that she thinks that Abbott is recreating Fidel Castro's Cuba, where everybody snitches on their neighbor. And there
is a little of that, although I suspect that the lawsuits will be done mainly by, NGOs, by conservative NGOs, right? As opposed
I think all 4 abortion providers in the state are going to shut down, and there won't be anybody to sue.
Yeah,
I think that seems to be what's going to happen. So, I don't think the bonanza will. But
you still
I believe it also makes you liable if you intend to aid an abortion.
Yeah. So
that's even bigger, a wider net that they're casting. I don't even know if that's constitutional or not.
So what is the soonest that Roe could actually be overturned? Could that happen?
Well, they've taken a case
midterms?
for the fall term. So.
Oh, that's the Mississippi case?
So next year, yeah.
So that could happen before these midterms.
Correct. And if the Republican justice, well, I think it's likely to happen before the midterms because usually they decide cases that are heard this fall, next summer before the midterms. Now, sometimes they kick them over, but I believe it's likely to be decided. But they're not necessarily going to throw out Roe. They might chip away at it.
Well, especially if some of the conservatives who are politically minded, who are just frankly partisan, worry about the effect you're describing that the Republican Party.
If they were really politically minded, they wouldn't have done what they did this week. They would have.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think maybe you could make. I don't know, but I think there could be other explanations.
It both helps the Democrats electorally and got Biden off the Afghanistan hook. It was a win-win for the Democrats.
Yeah, but the Afghanistan hook, that wouldn't be occurring to them. They're not that politically attuned or that fine-grained politically attuned.
Probably not, but one of us is clerk for a court, Bob.
Hey, Mickey, I have bad news for you. Now, I know, I do not want to get back to this infrastructure thing, but I know that you put out an issue of your newsletter, Chaos Files. By the way, the name of my newsletter, which we discussed earlier, is Non-Zero.
It serves me right.
What serves you right?
I put out an edition of my newsletter saying that if Newsom goes down, it will be a national signal to Congress not to pass the infrastructure bill. And as soon as I hit the publish button, polls started pouring in saying that Newsom was coming back, and it was well ahead. But he might have peaked too soon, Bob, and I don't quite trust the polls.
Anyway, it was an interesting argument. But I think the weakness you acknowledged was that it's not as if this is a single issue recall. It's. I mean, you were hoping that his identification with what policies would make politicians gun shy about voting for the soft infrastructure. Well, there are a bunch
of them. There's his homeless policy, his crime policy. He's perceived as allowing a huge crime wave. His general PC-dom in education and COVID restrictions are the big 4, and only the PC one is even arguably part of the infrastructure packages. But it would just be a general revulsion against liberal overreach, and it would show that voters are pissed off, and when voters are pissed off, congressmen don't like to do things like pass an immigration amnesty that might piss them more off. And that's what we learned when Eric Cantor went down to defeat. It killed the immigration amnesty in 2014. And I was hypothesizing that if Newsom goes down to defeat, that might kill the Biden New Deal in 2021. I agree that there's not an issue. There's not a big issue overlap between the two, but there is a liberal overreach overlap.
Okay, so the bad news I bring for you is Newsom related, which is that I saw you just tweeted today. Is Newsom's problem really, quote, looking like a politician, unquote? He looks like a guy people run from in a singles bar. The bad news is, well, first bad news is singles bars, as I explained to you in the Parrot Room last week, apparently virtually don't exist anymore because of dating apps. But secondly, he's not the kind of guy that they run from a singles bar. We look like the kinds of guy women run from a singles bar. He does not. Well, for better or worse, he looks like exactly the kind of guy who, back when there were singles bars, would have done wonderful.
Today you look very Newsom-esque, Bob. You're all polished and coiffed. And did you use hair gel? You sort of have.
I did wash my hair, which has become a pretty rare event since it got long because of the effect. But right now I've got it in ponytail mode, so you can't.
Maybe you're planning a trip to a singles bar tonight. Who knows?
It could be.
But Newsom just looks like a douche. He looks greasy. He looks slick. He talks. You haven't seen the way he wiggles his body when he talks. He's very proud of his body. He shows it off. It's not just the greasy hair.
Everything you've just described.
His whole affect is, I am full of myself. And
everything you've just described is a formula for success in singles bars, back when singles bars existed. Especially,
you're
I
the
am full of
expert,
myself.
Bob, but you're the expert in Darwinian courtship. But
they were
I
singles
don't see
bars were virtually a second home for me.
Anyway, it's possible. I mean, the women I know who are all classy women who are, wouldn't want to deal with any guy who's going to sweet talk them and screw them.
No.
Would run screaming from Gavin Newsom, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe your kind of women, Bob, your kind of women would fall for it.
You talking about my wife, man?
No, not your wife.
I heard what you said. She's right upstairs. Would you like to have a word with her?
You want
to say that to her face?
Not talking about Lisa. Sorry.
Okay. Did you hear what Tim Noah said about us?
No, he called me a fringe right extremist. So
there's that. But no, what he said.
He's not in my. He's in my doghouse at the moment.
Here's what he said. I mean, not about us in particular, but people who have Substack newsletters. Now that he has terminated his because he got a job at the New Republic, easy for him to say. But he called Substack, quote, the new euphemism for male menopause. You can take that line down?
20 years ago, James Wolcott called the Washington Monthly people the hair club for men. So I think the male menopause note has been played for a long time. I think I'm past male menopause.
I thought there was a tone of
through to the other side.
I thought there was a tone of bitterness, frankly. It was unbecoming of Tim.
And tell it to Glenn Greenwald and Taibbi.
Well, I thought maybe
and Barry Weiss. I mean, Jack Schaefer is on Twitter now saying, if Politico is worth $1 billion, how much is Glenn Greenwald's Substack worth? Quite a bit of money.
Wait, is Politico worth? How much is Politico? Did Politico get sold?
They just got paid $1 billion by Axel Springer, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
$1 billion with a B?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
No kidding.
I didn't know any publications of that sort were making that much money.
They're not. It's a way too high a price.
So, COVID, Mickey, I made the mistake of saying some weeks ago in my newsletter that if our pattern, if our Delta pattern followed the British Delta pattern, then right around Labor Day, we would be, starting to breathe a sigh of relief. It is true that the cases curve is showing signs of not becoming completely flat, but moving toward a flatter slope. But that's not totally clear. But the amazing thing continues to be the death rate, which is totally unlike what Britain saw. I mean, our per capita death rate is way more than twice what Britain's ever was, even though our per capita case rate has not gotten nearly as high as theirs got. We've talked about this before, and I just, could it be Britain's superior or more equitable healthcare system? Could it be that their higher vaccine rate? I was thinking maybe also they just record more of the cases, that they have a more comprehensive data gathering
system. They're more
vaxxed,
too. That's the key.
Yeah, that's the one possibility. But anyway, we are now up at 1,400 deaths per day. That's a 7-day average. And we were, like 5 weeks ago, we were in the 200s. It's unbelievable. But again, the cases curve is getting a little better looking.
On the origins of the virus, there was an article in Science trying to swing the pendulum back to saying it wasn't the lab, it was an animal intermediary in the wet market, and it wasn't completely convincing. It did help. It did note that they tested the market and the virus was everywhere, and it was like I think we mentioned that before. And B, that there are other SARS-type viruses with the furin cleavage, whatever the fuck that is the key modification to the spike protein. So it's not just that this thing, that must have been from a lab because it has this cleavage. There are other ones found in nature that have the cleavage.
Yeah, I think the furin cleavage had been seized on by lab leak hypothesizers, and I think they said two things. They said, first of all, these do occur. You do see these naturally in comparable circumstances, but also they said, and this is one of the places where you just have to take their word for it. You're out of your depth, but they said this is not the way you would go about doing it if you were tinkering with it genetically. I didn't read the paper.
Why is that true? If it's the key modification that lets it spread more easily, why isn't that the modification?
That's what I mean. There was something about the really, in the weeds characteristics of it that just aren't the way you would do that, even if you wanted to do that. That's what I mean. I am unfit to judge. Yeah. Now I'm relying. I didn't read the paper. I heard it summarized on this podcast. The week in virology, but I felt exactly the way you did. It didn't answer. For example, it didn't. Well, I didn't hear them address the question of whether in, I think, November, some workers at the lab got an illness that had characteristics strikingly like COVID. They did say, I don't think they addressed that per se. They also said, in terms of where it was, where they found, I guess, evidence of it early on. What was this data set? Anyway, there was something that was indicating its prevalence on one side of the Yangtze River that the lab is not on and the market is on, and not much prevalence on the side the lab is on. On the other hand, in one scenario, it's just like, it's just one worker, right? I mean, these accidents don't strike tons of people at once. It would have been one worker. In one scenario, is the worker goes to the market. The market is a dense place, and that's, what happens. So I don't know. The jury's still out. I think maybe we'll never know.
Well, the biggest argument that it comes from the lab is how paranoid the Chinese government is about it and how they're restricting what we can find out about it. If it was not from the lab, why wouldn't they be more transparent? I guess they figure that Western journalists will cross-examine their scientists and make them look guilty even if they're not. That, I don't know, it seems to me the risks are much greater if they clamp down. The second interesting thing was that there was an article in Newsweek that I thought was sensationalizing, which was, everybody's going to try to do research on a coronavirus, and that's going to increase the chances that something actually will leak from a lab, and we'll have another deadly epidemic. And I thought this was sensational until I saw that Peggy Hamburg, who was the former FDA commissioner and a friend of mine, endorsed it, and she is the most cautious person in the world.
So wait, what is this theory again? I didn't grasp
The theory
that.
is that if every country gins up a lab to try to study coronaviruses, that multiplies many-fold the labs from which a new virus could leak in the future. So They not only have to be new labs, they have to be super safe labs, or else it's not worth it.
So what does that mean about this theory, or why China would cover it up, or anything?
It doesn't mean
like
anything about the theory. It's agnostic about the theory. It just says that the theory is plausible enough that we should worry about it in the future, not that this one came from that.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that, the people who wrote this paper in Science, or I think there were a lot of authors, but they are all these scientists, and a lot of people in the scientific community are afraid that blowback from the lab leak hypothesis will lead to research constraints. I mean, some of them are, I think you really are big enthusiasts about gain of function research, for example. And so, and for that matter, the hosts of this podcast are in that community. So I don't know who to believe.
You're in that community?
No, the guys who hosted the podcast that I heard, via which I heard a description of the paper.
What's the argument for gain of function research? Because it seems crazy to me.
I guess you learn. I assume the idea is you learn, like, what are the plausible ways that existing viruses could become dangerous to humans, and then you can presumably take, I don't know, some kind of precaution. You can start preemptively developing vaccines. It's a good question. I'm skeptical that it's a great idea. But I don't know. Now I would say there's one other thing. Part of this I can just talk about in the Parrot Room on the kind of Bret Weinstein, Ivermectin, vax skepticism front. A couple of things. One is that, this guy, Pierre Kory, who was a big, I think both an Ivermectin, mainly an Ivermectin booster, I guess. Not so much a vax skeptic. I'm not sure about that. But I learned something about what may have driven him into an arguably irrational attachment to Ivermectin. I can talk about that in the Parrot Room. What's that?
There's a tweet by Daniel Horowitz that is very pro-Ivermectin that I haven't read. So I hate to postpone things for the Parrot Room, but I would like. I think I will try to read it before we do that and try to throw it in your face. No,
I have said all along, I think the jury is out on Ivermectin per se. Okay? I've looked at this pretty closely. I am not ready to dismiss the possibility that it has value as either a prophylactic or a therapy. I'm not in that crowd. What I have said is that Bret Weinstein has been flatly irresponsible in the way he's handled this. And he finally, this week, admitted... Well, he revealed one thing that he just learned that's about this. There was this study that was cited both by this Pierre Kory guy and by Bret Weinstein in Argentina, where ivermectin looked like it had miraculous properties as a prophylactic. Bret says he's asked the guy who did the study for his data set. The guy is balking, so there's grounds for suspicion. But the other thing is, I had told you, like, a couple of months ago, when I heard Pierre Kory on Weinstein's podcast touting this study and saying, this shows that in this study, nobody who took ivermectin got COVID. Tons of people in the other part of the study did, although the study wasn't randomized, by the way, but I'll leave that aside. And it's on the basis of this study that Bret Weinstein said the evidence suggests that ivermectin is close to 100% effective in preventing COVID. That was on the basis of this study. And 2 months ago on this podcast, all I had to do was glance at the study to say, wait a second, they weren't just testing ivermectin. There was a second treatment that everyone who got ivermectin got. It involved putting nasal spray in your nose 5 times a day, coating your nose. It's like Elmer's glue or something. It's like made it hard for the virus to penetrate the membranes of your nose. So how can you go around saying this says anything about either of these two treatments when they were provided jointly? Now, finally, this week, Bret Weinstein, maybe he said this before, but he admits, he says, he does his little mea culpa, like, actually there were 2 drugs being studied in this study, and so I shouldn't have concluded that ivermectin is 100% effective, even leaving aside the fact that the whole study is now dubious. Now, all that said, I do think it could turn out that ivermectin will have some positive effects.
It could turn out what? You're mumbling. I'm suddenly attracted to you.
It could turn out that ivermectin will have some positive effects. Now, as I said earlier, a few weeks ago, on the prophylactic front, you would have to take it with a frequency whose safety we don't know anything about, okay? Because when it's taken as an anti-parasitic, although tons of people have taken it that way, they haven't taken it with the kind of frequency you'd be taking it as a prophylactic for COVID. So the safety of that treatment can't be assured. Right. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan...
Is he out of the woods? I haven't figured that out yet. Joe Rogan contracted COVID. Is he now recovered completely? Is that why the news is out?
Well, he says he took everything you can take and feels much better. He took,
but
including ivermectin.
So did that guy Valentine, and then he died.
Which Valentine?
So, the conservative talk show host who also boosted ivermectin, and there's audio of him on the show saying, "I took ivermectin, I feel fine now. I feel completely recovered."
Rogan wisely took a couple of other therapies that actually are considered clearly valuable. But I also think that although the Times piece said Rogan refused to say whether he'd been vaccinated, some credible source on Twitter said he had been vaccinated and that Rogan was not disclosing that, maybe, for reasons I won't speculate on. But if he's been vaccinated, he should tell us for a couple of reasons. So I don't know why he would refuse to tell us. That seems kind of weird. But that could... It's almost as if, in this guy's theory, it's almost as if Rogan wants to be able to attribute recovery to ivermectin and other things rather than vaccination. But I'm not sure he has. I don't know
it enhances the suspense, since these unlikely breakthrough cases rarely result in death, right? Although even that is eroding a bit, I think.
I have. I think I know somebody who knows somebody who'd been vaxxed and died of Delta.
Who died?
Died. DIED.
This isn't that guy you were saying before who went to the convention, is it?
I said somebody went to a convention?
You said you knew somebody who had a breakthrough infection.
Oh, the guy who went to the soccer... No, it's not him. Yeah. Speaking of which... I've been
preening like Gavin Newsom. It's not having the same effect, I'm afraid.
A lot of people get you mixed up. If I had $1 for every time I've heard, I love your podcast with Gavin Newsom, and I say, no, that's Mickey Kaus, and they say, Jesus, were they separated at birth or what?
Yeah, I don't think they say that. But Newsom has a knack for being annoying. Like when when somebody established gay marriage, I forget if it wasn't the court, it was some jurisdiction. He said, it's here whether you like it or not. That's just not something a smart politician says, because it pissed off so many people that they passed Prop 8, which made it illegal. Which was then thrown out by the court. But it's something that an asshole would say. Okay, basically. So his problem is not just that whatever he looks like.
The problem is that he's an asshole. I repeat, he would do wonderfully in a singles bar. You just keep listing these characteristics of people who do wonderfully in singles bars.
Anyway, I'm definitely voting for Larry Elder, but on the earlier question of do I want to get rid of Newsom, I was torn. But now, because of my theory that it will send a national signal about liberal overreach, I think I'm going to vote against him. Also, now that I know that he's well ahead, I know that my vote probably won't make a difference. So, very dangerous for him to have these polls showing him well ahead, because it may be like Brexit. Everybody feels, well, Brexit's going to lose, so hey, I might as well vote for it and register,
or just not show up.
Yeah, and so I will probably be one of those people. I better get my ballot in.
You better. I kind of think you will. That's my theory. So,
You kind of think what?
I think you will get your ballot in.
I think I will get my ballot in, and all too predictably, I will vote against Newsom.
Okay.
But Tim Noah won't talk to me. He'll call me a right-wing fringe person again.
Who is suffering from male menopause?
I've made my peace with male menopause. What is male menopause anyway?
I think I don't know. I don't know if it's supposed to be like about a big testosterone drop or what. I don't know.
Or is it just like a midlife crisis? I've had 50 of them.
I don't think it's just a midlife crisis. I think that's like a psychological thing.
I always thought male menopause was mainly psychological, but no? Okay.
Could be. I mean, there is the real thing of testosterone, That's why Joe Rogan takes testosterone supplements.
Sorry?
That's why Joe Rogan takes testosterone supplements. He's getting up there in the years.
He looks like it. I've been tested, Bob. Let me assure you there's no problem in that category. Isn't that what Trump said?
Yeah, in his debate. Yeah, that was one of many, what would I say, milestones in American political discourse that were established by Donald Trump. That was the first one when he referred to the size of his penis during a presidential debate.
I think Clinton broke more ground than Trump did.
In what way?
The blue dress.
She wore a blue dress? Oh.
It introduced the subject of semen into the national dialogue.
Wait, she didn't talk about the blue dress, did she? Oh,
Bill no, but because of his scandal, we wound up talking about it.
Yeah, but he didn't himself talk about it during. Well, anyway, yeah, no, Bill, look and yeah, no, Bill, he was a path-breaking president in a number of respects. So we've been talking for more than an hour. We might proceed to the Parrot Room. Go ahead.
I think we're allowed to say what we're going to talk about in the Parrot Room, as long as we don't interrupt dialogue, which we didn't do, to say let's save that for the Parrot Room. So I have some Parrot Room topics.
Okay.
Not many.
Okay, I'll write them down. What are they?
JD Vance. There was a hit piece on him in Business Insider.
Ooh.
Afghan refugees, do they commit more crime? Spoiler alert, unbelievably more crime. Something I learned about the New York Times and how they edit the paper, which was surprising to me, is every issue that we're talking about, housing, the virus, political wokeness, Me Too, really just an attempt by millennials to get boomers out of jobs and houses so they can make room for themselves. And that is the urtext of the urge underlying it all.
Wait, I got to write these down so we don't forget them. So is that two things? There's something about the New York Times and then something about...
Those are two things, yes.
So what's the New York Times thing? What's the code word for that?
I can't describe it without giving it away. So
it's a secret. And then the second thing is what?
The second thing is all of our politics driven by millennials' hatred of boomers and attempts to get them out of their houses and their jobs because the millennials are frustrated.
Or alternatively, is Mickey paranoid?
Alternatively what?
Is Mickey paranoid?
Paranoid. Okay. Well, I am paranoid, so that's true either way. But
okay.
There's Princeton. Is Princeton gone too woke?
Princeton woke.
And what does it mean that only 19% of the admittees are white males?
Okay.
That's about it as far as there may be.
Okay,
here's this Ivermectin tweet storm that I'm going to read.
And I want to say a little more about this Pierre Kory guy. I mean, this winds up suggesting that maybe Senate Democrats are to blame for a turn he took in his psychological evolution, a turn that possibly rendered him less discerning about ivermectin-related evidence. And I want to, are the Weinstein brothers postmodern? For all the time they spend criticizing postmodern, are they in fact postmodern? I'm going to ask that question.
I've gotten some blowback on our Weinstein brother obsession.
We'll save it for the end. Who you mean from someone other than than a commenter in the Parrot Room?
Yes.
Who is this person?
I don't want to say I had dinner with him.
Is it someone I know?
No.
Did you ask him if it's such a bad feature of the Parrot Room? Why does he keep listening to the Parrot Room? This isn't about the hunting, is it? So wait.
Good point.
So wait. I want to talk about why, like last week in the Parrot Room, you so successfully trolled me that I went into Led Tasso mode.
You went into what?
Led Tasso mode.
As opposed to Ted Lasso mode?
Yes.
Okay.
As you would know if you watch the show, there's one episode introduces a little kind of Jekyll Hyde thing where he can flip a switch and become not the epitome of kindness, but more of a Bobby Knight type coach.
Huh.
And like you managed to turn me into Bobby Knight, and I want to talk about why that is. And by the way, it's not gonna fucking happen this week, Mickey. Try as you might.
No, you see, I thought it was great, and I didn't think you were unhinged at all, so it didn't bother me.
A certain amount of blowback among the commenters. Somebody compared it to the famous Ann Althouse meltdown of 2007 on Blogging Head, which it was nothing like. Nothing.
That's insane. I did hear one thing I want to talk about at some point is I read an article that there is a Buddhist rule of thumb that you should never trust your first thought, trust your first action.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it?
And I wrote a book called Why Buddhism is True.
I know. That's why I go to you as the authority.
Never heard of it.
Well, I'll try to track it down, and we'll talk about it at some point. It does fit with evolutionary psychology because your first thought is often, I want to kill this male rival. When
right. And
ideally your second thought might be...
You should trust the part where you actually kill him? Is that the way this works?
That was one of the problems is why do you assume that your first thought isn't going to produce your first action?
Well, I guess if you don't trust your first thought, then your action is unlikely to reflect your first thought.
Right, I guess that's it. But
okay, so I embrace this new Buddhist principle. Let's see. Also, wait, am I going to say... Let me see if I have anything else I'm going to talk about. The remarkable impact of my being on the Ezra Klein podcast that had on my newsletter subscription numbers. We'll talk numbers. It's a tribute to the power of Ezra Klein. We could talk about Ed Asner. He died.
I guess we could. You've brought up Ezra Klein, which means
no, you can't trash him in my presence. He is now like a god to me.
Which means I have to piss on him.
Ezra is a god among men.
His defense of Gavin Newsom was less than compelling. The basic argument was this guy didn't know what he was doing. It's the same argument they gave for Jimmy Carter. This guy didn't know what he was doing, but now he's learning the ropes, so it'd be stupid to cut him off now. Well, okay. He did allow... And then another leftist named David Dayen, who is sort of much sharper and more... And he raises hackles much more than Ezra does, said, well, it really is a mixed bag because he did allow... His implementation of things has been really bad, including the massive, massive unemployment fraud that he has allowed, which was in the tens of billions of dollars for a state like California, which is unbelievable. Anyway, it
would
was
just
sort of
like
a
to repeat
tepid endorsement, actually.
I would just like to repeat that Ezra Klein is a god among men. Also, I just thought of something that I may say in reply to your arguing that Afghan refugees have a high crime rate. I think I may have a devastating riposte, and it just occurred to me.
It's that these aren't just any refugees; these are interpreters.
Mickey, if we,
yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, no, go ahead. I mean, presumably this is a different demographic from Afghans who, if you're talking about all existing Afghan refugees of the past, this presumably is a different demographic.
Well, if you looked at we might as well talk about it now. Fuck it. If you looked at the Jason Richwine at the Center for Immigration Studies looked at in Austria, 22 times the normal rate of rape, 37 or something times the normal rate of robbery. In other countries, it was lower than that, but it was still, 3 or 4 times the normal rate in Denmark, etc. And these are the migrants that came to Europe over the past few years. They are different than the people who fled Afghanistan in our airlift, but our airlift was not rigorously vetted. It was only a quarter or so. It was some small percentage were the SIVs who had been vetted. It's basically everybody who made it to the airport and got onto the plane. So
come on, there was some screening.
It's not all that different.
There was screening, but
it's not as different from just the migrants who managed to make it to Germany.
What do you know how different they are? I mean, it could well be that the kinds of people who are translators and things have a radically different demographic in terms of income level and education.
But it wasn't mainly
else.
Translators. That's the point.
What was it?
People that made it to the airplane.
I cannot believe that 3/4 of the people on those planes just elbowed their ways on and didn't meet the criteria. I refuse. That just sounds crazy.
Okay, well,
I think
the answer is neither of us knows, but it is a...
Yeah, but your surmise is wilder than mine.
Not really.
Not so wild to surmise.
Given the statistics, we've shown that we only got a portion of the interpreters out.
Finally, I ask, speaking of wild surmises, do you know who wrote the book Not So Wild a Dream?
Sorry?
Do you know who wrote the book Not So Wild a Dream?
No.
I do.
Well, good for you.
Thank you. Okay, I think it was Eric Severide, whom most of our viewers are probably too young to remember.
Eric?
Severide.
Oh, really?
I believe.
He was the most pundity of pundits.
CBS commentator, back when there was a strict distinction between reporting and commenting.
He's the sort who would write a column comparing Newsom and Biden without noticing that there was any overlap of issues and declare that a vote against Newsom was a vote against liberal overreach.
Wait, Eric Severide would have?
He was always making grandiose connections. Yeah, that's his job.
He did make grandiose connections.
He had his finger on the mood of the country, Bob.
Quite so. So we should go. I'm going to quit listing things I'm going to talk about in the Parrot Room because every time I do it, you insist on talking about them here, which isn't exactly the business model, Mickey. Not exactly.
Okay.
Not exactly.
Sorry, dock my pay. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, the Parrot Room is at patreon.com/Parrot Room. Mickey is at Cal's Mickey. Twitter and then Cal's Fuzz newsletter. My newsletter's not zero.
I think we have a pretty good title for this episode.
Is it smash the like button and rate and review us?
Vortex of failure.
Same thing. Okay. See you there.
See ya.